Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, folks, wherever you happen to be right now, whatever time zone you're in. I myself am in Eastern U.S. time in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States, and I'm very happy to be here and to present and moderate our first Loyalty Summit live stream event. This event is tied to our upcoming Loyalty Summit London, which will be held at the Hyatt Regency London Blackfriars Hotel on September 21st. We're seeing a lot of excitement and buzz about this conference. We've got some great speakers lined up. We've got some great sponsors who are helping us out. We've got some great topics of discussion queued up for attendees. So if you have not checked out our website at www.loyaltysummit.com, please do so. You can check us out on our LinkedIn page. You can go straight to the website. You'll find all the information there. It's quite easy to register. And we are very excited for those of you that have already agreed to join us there. And we hope that if you're watching now, you will become one of them. We want to get right into the program proper. So I am going to ask our producer, Tommy, to bring in our two special guests. And then I will do a round of introductions before we get started. And I believe I can see both of you now, so I'm assuming our viewers can as well. Thank you both for joining us here on relatively short notice. We really appreciate it. I'm just going to do a quick introduction, starting with you, Danielle, and then give you guys a chance to talk a little bit about yourself, your company, your background, and then after we get the introductions out of the way, we will get right into the meat of the discussion. So Danielle, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Danielle is Chief Marketing Officer for Points and Plusgrade, and we're very excited to have her here. Thanks, Danielle, and tell us a little bit about the company for those of our viewers who may not be familiar with you yet.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here. So a little bit about Plusgrade. We're an ancillary revenue company, and we're mostly focused in the travel space. So we combine loyalty and ancillary retailing expertise to create great experiences for travelers. So when you think about ancillaries that we work in, think about those happy, positive ancillaries that make travelers happy. And these happy ancillaries create this massive opportunity for our partners. This year alone, we're going to deliver about $5 billion in revenue to our partners. So our suite of products include our flagship seat upgrade product, as well as our newer seat blocker offering. And last year, Plusgrade acquired Points, which is where I come from. I joined Points about 10 years ago and now serve as the CMO of both businesses. And Points, for those of you in the loyalty space, particularly travel loyalty, would certainly be familiar. We run things like loyalty currency retailing for our partners. So the ability for loyalty program members to buy points and miles.
That's great. Am I right in thinking that you're based in Toronto currently?
I am. I'm based in Toronto. We have offices in Toronto, Montreal, London, Dubai, Singapore, and Tel Aviv.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you in London as well, Danielle. And thanks so much for telling us a little bit more about Points and Plusgrade. And we are going to move on to Ian Pringle, who's long been a fan of and a partner for the Loyalty Summit. I know you and I have met back in the day, Ian, but I think it's been a little while, so it's great to see you again. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in London also. So tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background. I know it's quite storied in the loyalty space. And then maybe tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm Ian Pringle. I'm a loyalty consultant working for New World Loyalty. We provide loyalty consultancy services. I've worked in almost every vertical in loyalty, everything from airlines to utility companies to retailers. I even did a project in cannabis during lockdown in Canada. So there you go. Legalized in Canada. So there we go. But right. So I've worked in almost every vertical. And Rick, we met back in the day when I was working at Air Miles, I think.
Right.
And I've 28 years experience in loyalty marketing. So, and I now work for New World Loyalty, which is a loyalty consultancy that provides consultancy support for growing, changing, fixing loyalty programs. So about a third of my time is worked in launching new loyalty activities. Another third is fixing problems with existing loyalty programs. And another third of my time is either working with suppliers or working on startups or you just engaging customers, because loyalty isn't all about points and programs. It's about customer engagement, and that's a broad church and can include lots and lots and lots of disciplines that we get involved in. So that's, and I also run the Loyalty Podcast, which is a bit strange here because I've basically got a face for radio, which is why I prefer to be not on camera, and I prefer to have the edit button as well, which is a bit scary for this. And the Loyalty Podcast is a podcast that happens monthly, and we discuss topics of the day around loyalty. And we've had 53 podcasts now, 53 or 54, talking about lots of different subjects with subject matter experts for each subject. And those subjects cover everything from why loyalty to measuring ROI to loyalty partnerships to everything to do with loyalty. And we just discuss the topic of the day and put it out there. And we have listeners all around the world. We've had over 40,000 plays now, and of loyalty professionals. And we just have a laugh and discuss topics. And it's what you love talking about most. It's the easiest thing in the world, isn't it?
Exactly is. And just a point of clarification, I pronounced your name Ian because I have a son named Ian, but it's spelled I-A-N. So
Oh no, it's Ian. It's just a Scottish way. We're just funny that way. It's just Ian.
Ian. So we'll go with either one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there's a lot of legendary English rockers that are named Ian. So I thought that was a good name for a boy. So that's where that comes from. Okay, so we're going to get right into the meat of the discussion, and the theme of the conference, as you both know, for London, is Loyalty Reimagined, and it seemed like an apropos way to organize the conference this year, because that seems to be kind of the buzz in the industry, whether it's travel loyalty specifically or loyalty marketing in general. Everybody seems to agree, and sometimes we're talking about it explicitly, and other times it might be more implicit. But everybody seems to agree that the industry is in need of some type of a shakeup, and whether that's kind of a soup to nuts, foundation to roof reconstruction of the whole concept of loyalty marketing, or whether it may be more iterative and maybe just doing some things a little bit more differently, a little bit better. That seems to be what a lot of folks are talking about. And I was at the conference, the Loyalty Summit conference in DC earlier this year, and that was very much part of the topic of conversation. So I thought we would start there and just talk about that general idea. Are we right? Am I right in saying and thinking that travel loyalty programs are in need of a reimagination? Are they in a rut? Or is it more of just a matter of fine tuning in a business model that works and maybe doesn't necessarily need to be reimagined? So maybe I'll start with you, Danielle, and let you weigh in, and then we'll get the discussion going.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I think, I have a small view of the loyalty world. I'm mostly focused in travel, and in the way that I view things, I wouldn't describe it that way. For me, from our perspective, this kind of feels like the golden age of travel loyalty. And the reason I say that is because it feels like for years we were struggling to kind of get attention outside of the loyalty program at the C-suite table with airlines and hotels, right? Loyalty programs were kind of this small little aside. And what we saw during COVID is so many airlines specifically just making revenue off their loyalty programs when they had no other way to make revenue. And what that started to do was give the loyalty teams more of a voice at the larger table. And so we're really actually seeing the opposite. And we're seeing this as a time when loyalty programs have a voice that they've never had before.
Interesting. So from your perspective, and again, those of us who have been in the industry for a while certainly remember this, it was always very hard to get the attention of the C-suite. And if you ever did get their attention, it was usually about you're costing too much money and you need to do something about it, right? So from your perspective, you're saying that has changed, and that the C-suite is now starting to recognize the value of these programs and how critical they are to the overall brand and the enterprise.
Yeah, and it really is, it's a brand thing, but money talks, right? And when you get companies like a Delta, an American disclosing the value of their loyalty programs, and people understand how much money loyalty programs can actually make, that it's that shift of loyalty programs as a profit center rather than a cost center. So obviously that's not all it is, right? Loyalty programs, you need to engender loyalty. It's not just revenue, but once revenue is involved, you have a louder voice.
Yeah, I'm
Absolutely.
not sure. I see it, but I'm not sure I agree, or at least I see it in a different light. In that, I've always viewed travel loyalty programs are different from all other loyalty programs, and they're different because it's a dysfunctional marriage between two people. It's a dysfunctional marriage between the airline and the loyalty program. And the reason why I call it dysfunctional is they want different things out of the relationship, right? And while I agree, Danielle, in lockdown, one of the parties wasn't bringing any money in, and the other party was bringing in loads of money in. So naturally, the eye gets turned to that. But airlines like buying planes, and they like flying people, and they fundamentally are about frequent flyers. So I do really struggle with whether there's going to be an absolute sea change, because frequent flyer programs are for frequent flyers, and therefore, even though if you're a retailer, they would look at the long tail and say, hang on, guys, if we made $1 more from all these millions of members, that's where the big opportunity is. Airlines, the frequent flyer people, the loyalty people can see that, but the airline people never get that. Does that make sense? I mean, I know that's being provocative, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, like so I would say, Ian, I would agree. I think there's a shift that's sticking. Like I do agree. You have this classic tension between your revenue management folks and your loyalty folks, and somehow they've learned how to do math very differently, one to the other. But I think you do have that tension, which in some cases is necessary. So I totally see your point. I just think that the conversation is a little more equal now than it's been previously.
Maybe they've learned to go on holiday to the same places. You know?
Exactly. Well, yeah, I think, if you think about even 10 years ago, right, the big push was for airlines to consider, at least there was a lot of conversation around airlines kind of spinning off their frequent flyer programs. And of course, we certainly saw, a lot of evidence of that. Obviously, the big example in Canada was Group Aeroplan and the airplane program. And then, of course, you had, Aeromexico doing it, and a few other airlines either doing it or considering about doing it, like spinning these off as their own businesses because of how valuable they were. But then, of course, you saw kind of a clawing back of that, right? We had Aeroplan decide, hey, wait a minute, we actually do want to, Air Canada saying we actually do want to own our own frequent flyer program. We don't need anybody else to manage it for us. So there was a recognition of the value of these programs and the need for the airlines to own that whole experience of the program and all the data behind it. So if I hear you correctly, Ian, what you're saying is, even though that happened, they did recognize the value, it's still a little bit of a dysfunctional relationship.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think you can take each airline in itself and see where the balance of that relationship stands. Because you can take one airline where you can often see, by the way, if anyone wants to know how it works, is it's model airplanes, right? If you go into an office of someone, a frequent flyer program manager, and they've got a model airplane on the wall, they're in the airline. If you go into the office and there isn't a model airplane on the wall, they're on the other side. They're in the loyalty program, because you get that natural tension. You know which side people are on, but it does vary from airline to airline. And I say that because then you understand where you are on that continuum about what you can get away with, and where the debate is happening in that airline. So, certain airlines, maybe like Qantas, they may be really far along that discussion about gaining access, and Avios too, about gaining access to inventory, and they've beaten up, or there's been that fight between them and revenue management a long time ago. Whereas other airlines, that discussion's still not, or that debate hasn't been won, and you can absolutely tell when you look at the loyalty program and when you meet them exactly where they are. And you can look at their accounts, or you can look at the back of their wall, and if they've got a model airplane, you know where they are.
Right.
Have you seen similar things, Danielle?
Yeah, I think Rick's frozen. Yeah, it is really interesting when you kind of talk about you talk about those signs, right? And it's also we see it too on how when we'll run promotions on our buy miles stuff, the tension between the revenue management and really getting into the program economics. Should we be driving volume? Should we be driving yield? A lot of it has to do as well with redemption rates and what the award charts are looking like. So that tension too, you can kind of see it throughout, I think.
And where you can also tell on actually how the power or the control is distributed between them is on marketing channels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's where the rubber hits the road, because you can describe, and the way you describe a frequent flyer program again is if it's separate or not. It's like having a house with a flat on it. The flat is not a saleable entity and doesn't have any value if it doesn't have a front door and it doesn't have its own gas and electricity meter and all those other things, right? To make it a separate entity. But unless it has a front door, the front door bit is the marketing. If you don't have control over marketing, you don't have control over anything.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's what we've all seen, the successful kind of roll back into the Air Canada fold of the Aeroplan program. And you can really see, as an Aeroplan member, I'm from Canada, it's super important to me, that program. But you can really see that they have given a lot of thought to the customer experience throughout the loyalty program and weaving that into your journey. And so when you say that marketing front door, that does really ring true, especially in that Aeroplan example, because I see it all the time. It's that thinking about the traveler holistically and the loyalty program member, not just as a loyalty program member, but a traveler and someone who has opportunities to earn and burn, and that whole ecosystem.
And you also see it in, say, Avios, where they now control the British Air. I understand, at least they now control the UK, the BA Executive Club channels are now owned by them rather than the airline. But then the airline still owns all the channels, all their own channels. And so when you call a frequent flyer program, airlines will always see, airlines are, again, different from all other loyalty programs because there's a disproportionate value of customers. And it's so much more disproportional than almost any other category, which means that airlines will always gravitate towards frequent flyers because they're so important to the airline's revenue. Whereas, and it's not quite the same for the loyalty company. So when you talk about channels, airlines will always gravitate towards their most valuable customers, which aren't necessarily the same most valuable customers as the frequent flyer program.
Yeah, totally agree. Sorry, Rick, we're having a side conversation.
No, I'm glad you guys kept it going. My internet just pooped out on me, but hopefully everything's fixed now.
Curiosity outside of airline, Ian, like just because you do work with a whole bunch of different types of loyalty programs, do you see any of the difference in the travel loyalty in the way that's managed, kind of migrating over to other spaces? Or are you noticing any trends that are cross-pollinated?
There's one you always see, and it's because senior managers in companies are often very, very high collectors of frequent flyer points. So it often means that we have to explain why frequent flyer programs are unusual, and that the mechanics that work for frequent flyer programs don't often work as well in non-frequent flyer space. So that's a common discussion that we have.
Right.
But otherwise, what happens for in non-retail, non-loyalty is I think should be more important for airline loyalty programs. And particularly when we talk about communications, because, communications are being abused by everyone, right? The channels, email and other channels, digital channels, are just being abused by everyone. So, I mean, we'll get onto it when we talk about personalization, but and so other companies, non-airline companies, do a lot better at marketing to the long tail. Of course they do.
Right.
But that's partly because the airline's long tail is not that important to the airline, and that's a really clear distinction.
And I'm curious, guys, because I was in the middle of asking a question when I got kicked out. But the question I was getting to, and you guys may have answered it when I dropped off, was whether big has become the enemy of great. Or in some cases, are these programs just too massive at this point to really deliver the type of engagement that we need, particularly with the most valuable customers? Or do you sense that they've been able to manage that growth effectively?
Again, I'd say it's dysfunctional, right? Because they're growing and they're big, but you look at the pricing policy and you say that, discount economy is getting worse and worse value for the customer. That's being driven by revenue management and the airline, not by the frequent flyer program. And so you get this dysfunctional behavior of saying, I want to grow and I want to appeal to the lower base, but actually I'm making my pricing worse. And which means that a lot of people a lot of the less frequent flyers who come into frequent flyer programs are coming in because of the promise of a flight. And that promise of a flight is getting further and further away for them, right?
Right.
Because of this dysfunctional relationship. I'm calling it dysfunctional, but it's just a yin and yang. It's you've got to make both of them together. And I rarely see, it's a really tricky one to pull off, because you've got to have a single management system that allows both of those parties in the marriage to work together functionally. And that's really hard. It's really hard.
For me, I think the size, I think big is exciting, right? I think the growth is exciting. The interest is exciting. That means at least perception is that there's going to be value. Now it's on the program to actually deliver the value. And I don't know how to have this conversation without having the personalization conversation, right? Because you do need to understand those members, and every bit of data that I'm sure we've all seen says when you get them in, you have to engage them ASAP, right? The longer it takes for them to do their first transaction, their first earn, their first burn, you're more valuable in the end, the quicker you can make that first bit of behavior. And so making sure that you understand, based on whatever models that you have, whatever data that you have access to, that you can predict how to get that first engagement, means you're not wasting touch points. You're actually trying to customize offers or engagements to those members. So for me, big is exciting, but big is also scary and intimidating if you don't understand how to personalize that experience.
Yeah, although it's really difficult, because I've worked on 2 big projects in the last 12 months with retailers we've all heard of, right? Including in the US, Canada, and the UK. We've probably bought from these brands in the last 12 months. And we go into these conversations. It's easy as loyalty professionals to say personalization is critical. And of course it is. But at the same time the finance director wins the big discussion all the time, because if you throw enough mud at the wall, some of it sticks. And that's the problem we've all been doing in email. So I've worked with 2 big retailers in the last 12 months where they've come into it saying, we're doing these mass emails, and they give it because they just give us a bigger ROI. Mm-hmm. And we know it's wrong, but can you come and tell us how to do it differently? And we've come and the first iterations always make less money. It's always true. And the marketing and the finance director just wins these discussions, and it's massively frustrating, but it's true. And so it's hard. It's hard, right? To get people off that, because you're right. Big is beautiful, right? And big is profitable. And yeah.
What's interesting, and again, I have this skewed view, right? Because we're dealing with not the whole loyalty program, but just this part of the loyalty currency retailing. And I have on the marketing team a very robust data science and analytics team. It's actually half of my team. And the reason that this team kind of came to be is one of our partners at the time came to us and said, hey, for this campaign, we, because of a whole bunch of conflicts in our communications channel, you are only going to get 50% of the email touches as you normally do, but we're not giving you forgiveness on the revenue goal. And so very quickly you end up going, oh, damn, what am I going to do here? And what I did was borrowed a data scientist from the engineering team, who at the time, this is 10 years ago, wasn't really doing that much, and just said, I need you to build me a quick response model. Who is the most likely to respond to this offer? And that was kind of the beginnings of what is now a very robust data science and analytics platform. And it's really all the beginnings were trying to figure out who is the most likely to respond. Super, super simple. That was successful. So then we started thinking, who is the most likely to respond to what product, at what price, at what threshold? And now it's a series of models that run together to optimize. But just to say, there's a way to do it. You just have to be able to invest in things like predictions of who's the most likely to respond and who's most likely to be more profitable in that response.
Daniel, I absolutely love that, because it's bringing back the disciplines we used to have when we used to have to pay for stamps.
Right. That is such a great way to put it. I've never heard it put that way, but that is such a great way to put it.
Yeah, because we were much better at direct marketing when we had to pay for stamps, because now we don't. The finance director always wins, because he just says, just chuck it out all the time to everyone. And that's just bad discipline and bad economics.
Yeah.
But it's bad discipline and bad marketing, but it's good economics. And that's that's tough, right?
Yeah.
And so having that, I love that discipline. It's really, really good.
So as I framed the question at the start of the conversation about, how important it was to reimagine the concept of these programs, and whether, this model that has essentially been in place for, 40 plus years now, is in need of some type of reinvention. And if I could sum up what I heard from you guys, I think from Danielle, we heard that we are in kind of a new golden age, and that these programs are big and exciting, and there's all these kinds of new tools and analytical models and ways to extract as much value from the programs as possible for both the consumer and for the brand. But I also heard from Ian that in particular, as we talk about the airlines, there's still a bit of a dysfunctional relationship, and there's still some competing priorities between the folks that manage these programs and the folks that fly the airplanes. And the topic, as you guys were having the discussion, kind of moves smoothly into the next topic on our list, which was about the idea of customer engagement, which I'm very happy about. And the reason why this topic personally resonates with me is I wonder about, because this model of loyalty program, currency points-based program, is so, decades old at this point, I wonder if there's a bit of a brand perception problem that we might be facing at some point. An example that I saw was a new hotel program that launched just last month by a portfolio of brands called Ennismore. They're a subsidiary of Accor Hotels. And I know some of the Ennismore brands very well, because my wife and I are big fans of a boutique hotel chain here in the States called 21C Hotels. It's kind of a combination of hotel and art museum. They were bought by Accor and folded into part of this portfolio of brands. And now, even though Accor has its own program, that's been in place for a long time, they've now launched this new program, which they're calling Disloyalty, right? And the idea is that instead of being rewarded for doing the same thing repeatedly, they want to reward you with discounts and perks for doing something different. So you actually get more value from the program if you stay in a hotel that you've never stayed before. And if they open up a new hotel, you can get a 50% discount on booking in that new hotel within the first 3 months. So encouraging you in a cheeky way to be disloyal. But if you read about the branding and you listen to them talk about the program, there's almost this subtle message that they're delivering about, the old model of earning points for hotel stays kind of being something that, your parents and grandparents might be interested in. And maybe if you're a younger Gen Z or younger millennial person, that you need something different. And I'm wondering, just from a brand perception and engaging particularly younger consumers, is this model that's this old still resonating with those consumers, or are they looking for something else in a way that this program and their branding seems to suggest they are? So I'll let you guys weigh in on that. But that was an example that resonated with me quite recently.
Well, first, everything that Accor does, they're so wonderful at that emotional engagement, and Mehdi and team they do such a fabulous job, I think, of understanding their consumer. I think I'm going to give you an example of why that I was certainly shocked. I think that through COVID, we did a little survey because people were still buying points and thinking about, it was we understood that this was a hopeful thing. You were buying currency in order to be able to, in future, go on a trip and imagine your life outside of the pandemic setting, right? But one of the things that we did was we did a survey on why you bought points at the time. And this was with one of our airline partners. And it was an exit intent survey. And someone, and there were several verbatims here that said, I am buying these points because I really want to make sure my favorite airline makes it through the pandemic and they're around for me to travel once this is all done and I want to get back on a plane, which was the last thing I expected, right? I thought, hey, it's a great deal and I'm shoring up my points and miles. We're going to be the prevailing sentiment. And it's that there was that, of course, but what was really interesting was just really seeing these verbatims of that emotional connection that people still have with these really traditional frequent flyer programs, which I thought said there's something about the traditional model that still works. Now, is reinvention in the way that you talked about what Accor is doing fascinating and incredible to drive these new experiences? I absolutely love it. But I don't think this is a throw out the old model kind of situation because it is still resonating with people.
Good.
Yeah, I think what you said, Rick, is interesting, but I do think there is potentially a big threat on the horizon where, traditional FFP model where you reward behaviors and you give them flights. I think that's going to be here forever. For as long as airlines will exist, they'll be there. Where I do think, though, it might pivot massively, completely, is at the moment, this thought, especially for Gen Z, this thought that you fly more in order to fly more and you get rewarded for flying on an airline is nonsense, because I think that that the moment they're not loyalty programs at all. They're mechanics to reward you for flying on one airline, not choosing between airlines. Now, I think that in the future, the future of frequent flyer programs will be being rewarding for flying less, but making the right choice, making a choice of which airlines you fly with. I think that's where it's going to go, because if it doesn't, the targets for these eye-watering targets for cutting down emissions are going to stop them anyway, because otherwise people will see it as what it is. At the moment, it looks like a duck. It's a duck, right? It's rewarding flying more. If that starts going down the line, it's going to be going, and people start feeling the pain. We're going to have to change as an industry. And I think that our options, the fundamental option of being rewarded for changing behavior, is fundamentally right. But I think we're going to have to pivot as an industry to make it fit.
I think we're already starting to, I don't know if you're starting to see that, Ian, but just for sure in the travel loyalty programs, I'm seeing a lot more focus on everyday earn and burn activities, right? And on how do we engage with, rather than I'm saving for a flight or I'm saving for a stay, what are those smaller things that we can do to continue to engage people and reward them? And I think the expectation is now that how do we make that currency ubiquitous so that it is not just waiting for the big ticket item, and we can build that relationship that way. That's what I'm seeing. Certainly, a lot more focus on trying to find those opportunities, especially when you look at availability of redemption seats or things like that. Yeah, I think it's important, right?
It's tough as well. Yeah. In this environment, it's tough.
Yeah, and I wonder too, we talked about COVID as being kind of the black swan event that was both, kind of a combination of promise and peril for these programs, right? Because as Danielle pointed out, it's a great recognition both amongst consumers and the brands that run these programs about just how valuable they are and how they can help brands navigate those lean times, and also allow consumers to engage with those brands in ways that they probably didn't think about pre-COVID. But then you also have this, and I think the jury's still out about whether this is a long-term change or not, but also you have a fundamental shift in the amount and frequency of business travel, right? Because the road warrior was always the default best customer for a frequent flyer program, the person that's getting diamond status because they are flying so often. on business. And I wonder if we think that that level of business travel is ever coming back again, or are airlines going to have to kind of think about a new definition of a best customer?
I personally don't know. I've not been on the inside of an airline for a while, but having been involved in those discussions in the past, by seeing the behaviors of different airlines, I think that jury's still out, and I think different airlines will have different opinions.
And we're certainly hearing from our partners that, especially in the last little while, that business travel is finally starting to come back. It's different in different geographical regions. But one of the things that I'm finding super interesting is just that whole new focus on the leisure traveler, right? That mix of I'm going for business, and then I'm going to extend my trip and do a little bit of leisure activities, which I really find interesting for the development of those programs, right? Previously, I know I didn't travel that way. I travel that way now. And it's allowed me to, even though I get my status through work, so it's questionable, or I've heard the conversation to say, how loyal are you because work is booking? But what I'm finding is I am actually engaging more in the loyalty programs now in my leisure time, and earning and burning and using those points to extend my stay or change my flights. So I think there's a huge opportunity here in how do we get those maybe business travelers who have returned to engage in their leisure part of their travel with those loyalty programs as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, premium leisure was always a growing industry. I think that's been exacerbated, or it has been accelerated by COVID. I just think that each airline will have fundamentally very, very different problems right now.
Absolutely.
And therefore, as with all loyalty, is you need to, the fundamentals of loyalty are what behaviors are you trying to change, and let's encourage them. And I think you will start to see different models evolve as the airlines evolve their program to fit their particular strategic problem.
And we had touched earlier on personalization, and I wanted to make sure we gave a little bit of attention to that topic because I know, particularly in some folks that I've talked to in the retail space and with programs that my wife is involved in, both as a consultant and now at her current role, there's obviously big enterprise-wide pushes towards personalization and doing that effectively in the ways that Danielle described. But those efforts don't always fall within the rubric of a loyalty program operator. In some cases, they're focused on personalization without any need or awareness that they would like a traditional loyalty program branded in public. And I'm wondering if you guys can talk a little bit about the intersection of those two worlds, the push towards enterprise-wide personalization, which may or may not involve a loyalty program, and the personalization efforts within the loyalty program. Are we talking a Venn diagram? Are we talking a circle? Is one a subset of the other? I think a lot of organizations are trying to figure that out. And I'm wondering from your perspectives, whether in your conversations with clients, if you've heard them struggling with this issue.
I mean, it's the age-old question, right? But it's really frustrating when you see both sides of this dysfunctional marriage, because if you ask an airline if an airline, especially an airline, right? Retailers don't think this way, but an airline, if you ask to create an enterprise-wide analytics team, they will spend 5 years finding out that customers like chicken and beef once every 2 years, right? That's what they'll find out. Whereas if you see it from a perspective of a loyalty program and an airline understanding customers, all you needed to do was look at your co-brand credit card to realize that your second biggest purchase after your brand will be your biggest competitor. And how many airlines have actually integrated that data into their understanding of their enterprise-wide understanding of customers? And this is, again, it's an absolute example of why this dysfunctional marriage it's a huge opportunity that just doesn't often knit together. How many airlines actually use their co-brand credit card data to understand customers?
It's I think it's definitely something that's a struggle, right, Ian? I'm sure you've heard this from a bunch of the partners that you work with. Is you'll hear a lot about the frustration of siloed data sets, right? So how can we personalize if part A of the organization owns part of the data, B owns the other part, the loyalty program data sits over here. So when you have a traveler interacting, they're assuming they have one view of you, and anything less is going to disappoint them, right?
100%.
Because you don't compartmentalize, oh, this part of my journey lives with this part of this company. And so I think one of the things that I don't think it's a Venn, or it should be a Venn. I think
it's rarely a Venn.
Right?
Two circles.
I think in a lot of cases it's 2, it's 3, it's 4. And the airlines, the companies that figure out how to stitch it together are going to be the ones that succeed a lot faster, because it shouldn't even be a stitch together, right? It should be a journey, and it should really be about understanding a whole traveler, a whole loyalty program member, and what they need at different parts in their journey, and being able to talk to them and predict and understand what they're going to need, because that's where the revenue opportunities come in.
I agree 100%, and the law sits on the side of the customer in this. And I think the airlines and banks and others hide behind the law about saying, actually, GDPR doesn't allow you to do this. It does. It does. It absolutely 100% allows you to do it if you have permission from customers. But permission, and I think in loyalty programs, permission from customers could be forthcoming. Except I do think there's lots and lots of excuses to not do this. And I think that it's not great for customers. And if you want to do personalization, the best thing to do is to look at where they're frequently interacting with, not necessarily, and that might not be with your brand.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the biggest barriers, I think, is the expense, right? You have travel companies with these really arcane systems, and who it takes years to migrate over from one system or another. And what we're doing is trying to figure out, okay, you have these, in a lot of cases, antiquated systems. How do you kind of corral everything and bring it to one spot? And you have to, right? This is especially when now we move into the world of AI. That's not new, but that the regular consumer now is understanding what's possible. The expectations are even a lot higher.
The expectations definitely there. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, when I talk about this stuff, I always try to, just as much as possible, keep my customer hat on and try to think about things from the customer perspective. And I was having this conversation with a colleague about, in terms of personalization, what I would find important as a customer, particularly if I think I'm a good customer. And for me, it just came down to memory, right? Like, I want the brand to demonstrate that they remember me when I show up, right? And in some cases, I might get a thank you, Mr. Ferguson, for being a diamond member. Or you might get a basic kind of a greeting because they see a flag in the database that you're in a top tier, whether that's at the airline counter, at the hotel. But that's not quite the same as them demonstrating memory and remembering what my last visit was and where I went and what my amenities I prefer, and being able to do that in a seamless way. And it doesn't seem to me, just from a customer perspective, to be something that's that difficult to operationalize, but yet we see so few examples of it. And I'm wondering if, as we move into the discussion about technology, Danielle, you had mentioned about, some legacy system challenges that these companies are dealing with. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, but we've all been in the business for a few years, and I remember having the same conversation 10 years ago about legacy technology and how everything needed to be upgraded. And it's kind of surprising to me to hear you say that is still the case. So I'm wondering if something as simple as that, a brand demonstrating memory to somebody like me, is something that we have the ability to do today from a technology platform standpoint, or do we still have a ways to go to get there?
I think we have the ability to do it. And to just push on your point a little further, Rick, right? We were talking previously about engagement. Well, if we're expecting loyalty program members to be engaged and have this emotional type of loyalty, it's a two-way street, right? I'm going to be more engaged as a loyalty program member if I feel that the company I'm engaging with is engaged with me. And so that notion of the the second part of it. It's a little disingenuous to be able to say, well, I expect loyalty from these people if the engagement coming back doesn't feel very engaging, right? And so, yeah, so from a technology perspective, I think like the technology exists. It's just what you have is, I think anytime you think about a large travel company migrating things like a booking platform or different parts of their guts, that migration project alone takes years and years, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's one of those things where it's possible and it exists, but there has to be this organizational kind of foundational thinking that things do have to change from a technology perspective.
And foundational thinking in a dysfunctional marriage. So I'll give you a really good example of that. So I'll give you an example again, because in a utility company, we launched with Nectar. So I was working for EDF Energy. We launched with Nectar. And in the first week, we had a discussion all around the business, what we wanted to sell. And so this department wanted to sell showers. This department wanted to sell wiring reviews. This one wanted to sell gas. This one wanted to sell electricity. And I said, forget all of that. What you want is your customers to go into Sainsbury's. You want to get your customers into the proposition, get them to go into Sainsbury's, get them to start collecting at BP, because these are the regular, everyday petrol and grocery. Once you've got them in doing that, then sell wiring, then sell your stuff. And everyone agreed to that because everyone could see the sense. Now, again, rewind to our discussion about who owns the channel, because if an airline owns the channel, they want to sell, they've got a list of stuff they want to communicate to their customers, which might not be as relevant as the partner stuff, but they hold the pen, right? And to wrestle that pen off them is really hard. And then you've got all the other system stuff too, about how do you manage the and it's always easier just to go with one or the other. One team wins or the other team wins. That's always the easiest thing to do, and that's often why you see what you see. But don't underestimate, Rick. Once you step behind that curtain, how complicated the wiring is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the shortcuts is really just looking at like a whole overhaul it's tough, and you need it. Obviously, it's expensive. It's tough, and you need alignment. I think one of the ways that we are seeing our partners kind of get around this a little bit is in the partnerships that they choose to engage in, right? So in the smallest part, just in this loyalty currency retailing, the data that we collect from transactions and that we get from our partners on traveler behavior, on what they're earning, they're burning, they're redeeming, we're able to act as data aggregators for them in this one sense, where it would be very difficult for them to be able to pull and action this data. But I think making smart partnerships in this way that can give you insights to different parts of the business, or can give you access to things that you don't have resources to do yourself. I'm finding that the smarter companies who are able to move quicker understand what they should insource and what they should outsource. And so that's a really great way of being able to modernize without having to overhaul.
I absolutely love that. Any heavy lifting that you can do to take that, because if you gave the airline the whole problem in saying you've got airline priorities and you've got all the partnership priorities, you make sense of that. That's not going to happen. Yeah. Whereas if you can make sense of the partnership side and really help them out about, to this customer, this is the next best action. To this customer, this is the next best action. That's really smart thinking, and that really will help them out 100%. It might, you've still then got to make it work, but it would really, really help them out. It's a huge shortcut.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up, the hot topic from the technology standpoint that everyone has been talking about for the past, at least for the balance of this year, of course, which is generative AI and all of these new tools that we have at our disposal that could potentially disrupt everything that we do in terms of engaging with customers. And it could mean things have impacts for jobs. It could have impacts for call centers. It could have impacts for branding and marketing digitally. We are still talking about NFTs and digital tokens and all the other little technological advances that we've seen that we are still trying to figure out what the impact is. Do you guys hear your clients having those conversations about how best to integrate some of these new technologies into their marketing efforts? And is there a conversation about, does it seem big and existential, or are there brands finding kind of practical solutions at this point to be able to integrate some of these new technologies into their programs?
I mean, I'm seeing both. And in talking to our partners, really, and especially on the data science and analytics side, I think we're likening this to the last kind of big thing that really changed the way we could compute and market, was having data in the cloud, right? So not having to have data on-prem. This just cloud migration was this way that we were able to house and crunch really large data sets. When you look at AI, this feels like, I mean, that's the cloud thing isn't like a big sexy topic, but for those of us in the middle of it, it was this incredible enabler. AI is, I think, similar in scope, or this generative AI is similar in scope, and in the way that it can shift businesses. What we're, the easy applications is that a lot of people are experimenting with it from a customer service perspective, because of the large language models that we're seeing have this understanding of the intent of language, which we've never been able to have before. But then when I think about internally, we're using AI now very frequently on our marketing copy, and then we tweak on press releases, and then we tweak. And so from a ways of working, it's super important, but then also just the ability to, I think from every aspect of every communications or booking path, really being able to have data that now generates itself and is creating its own data sets to be able to make predictions and be able to make offers. If we are slow on this in the industry, this is, again, another place where loyalty program members are going to feel like we need to engage. And so I do feel like in conversations with our partners, everyone is thinking about it. The maturity level of how people are thinking about it varies widely.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. I think it's another thing. I mean, if we turn the clock back 5 years and we were having a conference, everyone would be talking about blockchain, right? And I think now it's only after the 5 years that we're starting to see, or at least in the next year or so, we'll start to see proper solutions for proper problems coming out of the woodwork, right? But I agree. If people don't think AI is already here, of course it is. It's probably in. Is in everything. I don't write a press release without first putting it through ChatGPT, right?
Yeah, there's that classic model of tech hype you guys have probably seen, where the curve just shows like the hype going, up and up and up and up and up, until everybody realizes that it's not 90% hype, and then you have the valley of like crushed expectations, right, where everybody decides it was all hype and nobody's talking about it anymore. And then slowly the curve comes back up as people actually start to find practical solutions for whatever the latest round of tech hype was. So it sounds like with generative AI, we may have even skipped a little bit of that valley of crushed expectations, because we've already found a lot of utility in using it, as you guys talked about, just for marketing copy. I do it myself. But what I wonder about is, the human element. When, as a consumer, it's already difficult enough for me to engage with a real person when I'm interacting with one of these brands, unless I'm at the airport, or at the hotel counter. And I wonder when, all the call centers, all AI operated, and you're talking to a virtual chat bot with an AI generated person, and the human element is just completely removed. I wonder what impact, if any, that will have on our engagement with these programs, and whether there will still be a place, for the ghost in the machine. And I don't even know if I have a question there, but I'd be curious about your thoughts as to whether the human element is still going to have to be there.
I do think it will change programs, and I absolutely hope it changes the customer interaction. But again, it lives and dies by the quality of that execution. But equally, I don't think it will ever get rid of the human being, especially innovation. So, with Phil Gunter, when he first came to a conference, 8 years ago or whatever, with Virgin Australia, and said, I'm going to go to a revenue-based model, AI would never have predicted that, and it wouldn't have been able to create the model that did that. And yet, you show me an airline that isn't either on a revenue-based model or thinking about a revenue-based model now. And so I do still think that we're human beings. We're as Kurt Vonnegut says, we're monkeys, right? And we still need to have that fun and have interactions with each other. And I still think that's the best loyalty programs will still appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think it just in just the ChatGPT instance, like what it's shown us is this is going to enable scale in a different way, right? It is going to be able to obviously automate tasks that can be automated to allow people to focus on different things, and to, like you said, Ian, innovation could be the big winner here, because you'll have more time, I think, to think through innovation. You just think about. I remember we had this meeting when we had first seen ChatGPT launch, and did a marketing brainstorm around how we could use this. And our designers and our copywriters just all were like, geez, do I still have a job? Of course you do. Your job's just a little bit different, because now you have to learn about prompts. You have to learn about different ways to communicate. And we were talking to our data scientists at the time, because they had a similar instance, right? Before, you were doing math in spreadsheets, and then all these computing tools that we use for machine learning. It just made you be able to handle way more data and be able to just be way more efficient about how you handle it, and gives you more time to think through more complex problems. I think as long as we all think about it that way, the human interaction is just different, then I think it just puts different stresses on what you have to deliver.
Certainly. I agree completely. And I've already seen the efficiencies in my own work, and I'm sure we're going to continue to see those bear fruit over the next few months and years. And we're just about out of time, so I just want to give each of you an opportunity to give a little bit of a final summation, if you will. And I'll just keep it as simple as possible as we gear up towards our conference in London. I'm looking forward to seeing you both there. What does the idea of reimagining loyalty mean to you, and what gets you the most excited about where this industry is headed, so we can end things on a positive note? Danielle, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, first of all, thanks for the conversation. It's been great speaking with both you and with Ian. I think, look, I'll go back to my first point, and I do think we are in a bit of a golden age of loyalty, and I think just we have the attention, and we have to continue to push. And one of those things, I'll be talking about that in London with James Curry from Skywards, and we're going to talk about a lot of the really fun stuff we've done on their programs and that we're going to continue to do. So hoping that I see a bunch of people there, and James and I can take you through some of the successes that will hopefully inspire other people.
That's great. I can't wait for that discussion. Well, looking forward to that. And with that, Ian, we'll give you the last word.
No, I'm really excited. I mean, we've filled an hour today, and we haven't even touched the surface, really.
Right.
And it's really exciting. As I said, I've been in loyalty for 28 years. And yet for the first 20 of it, nothing seemed to happen, right? We seem to be doing the same things and rolling out the same propositions. In particularly last 5 years, things have changed radically. And if it isn't happening, and it's absolutely happening to frequent flyer programs, but looking outside of frequent flyer programs, loyalty is radically changing. And I think it's a really, really exciting prospect. And you said it before, Rick, the fundamentals are still going to be there. As long as airlines exist, frequent flyer programs will exist, and we'll have an appeal to customers. But I think how that evolves over the next 5 years will be fascinating. I think that a lot of those subjects will be covered at this conference.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I know you guys are as well. And we are just about at the hour mark, and I know you all have your day jobs to get back to. So I definitely want to thank you both once again for joining us on our very first Lifestream event. Danielle Brown with Points Plus Grade, thank you again. Looking forward to seeing you. And Ian or Ian Pringle, whichever pronunciation you prefer, looking forward to seeing you as well. Thank you guys both for your time. It was a great conversation. Sorry my internet pooped out here or there, but it all seems to have ended well. So thanks again, and look forward to chatting with you all again soon.
Thanks then.
Thanks
Nice
so
to see
much.
you.
Bye-bye.